It was only a toy phone, but it had a ringtone like a real one, the same as the landline in the house. It had irritated the adults to no end, always being confused between whether I was just playing or whether the phone was actually ringing. In the end, to their delight, I outgrew the toy, though not before a year's worth of fond memories and battery replacements. After that, any and all of my allotted toys had rechargeable batteries, or did not require any. I hadn't heard that ringtone in so many years, not since I left my parents' house. The old toy had long since been abandoned, and although the house I live in now has a landline, no one ever calls me on it. I never even bothered to check and see if it works. Even if it did, I probably wouldn't be receiving any calls. No one would bother to, not even on my cell phone. I had lived, for the past 4 years, completely alone, and somehow what few friends I had had in early childhood had either died, moved away, or just forgotten that I exist. Between a lack of interest in making new friends and feeling that the task would be unnecessarily difficult, I had ended up alone, altogether. My day-to-day life consisted of nothing very much in particular, and I did not really see how having people around me for the mundane tasks of chopping wood and carrying water would improve either my life or anyone else's. So, when I heard a landline ringing, it really seemed unbelievable, and it was. It had turned out to be nothing more than a dream. I dreamt that I heard a landline phone ringing, ran into the kitchen where it was, and saw my old toy phone on the small dining table. Confused, I picked it up, and suddenly I was lying awake in my bed. It was the middle of the night. That was how the dream started, with just picking up the phone that I hadn't seen in over a decade, and waking up in my room again. From that night on, I would keep dreaming about random different events. Memories from my childhood, but always distorted. Each night, the dreams would be a little longer than usual. They were always so real, so vivid. The only way I would know that I was dreaming was if I heard the phone ringing. Whenever I did, I would run to it and pick it up hurriedly. Then I'd wake up, back in my bed, in the middle of the night. I'd dream about my old home, my childhood room. It was dark, everything seemed to be painted in blood, and there was no furniture but only heavy curtains to block any light from outside entering. The room made me nervous, and I heard footsteps all around me, coming closer and closer until the phone rang. It suddenly appeared in front of me, and I picked it up nervously. I woke up in my bed, covered in cold sweat, in the middle of the night. The next night, when the phone rang and I picked it up, I did not wake, but instead was transported into a different dream, this time of a cemetery. I was staring at the graves of my parents, next to one another. I had not been back to visit the site, and the last time I was there, I had been surrounded by family friends, childhood friends, people I had not yet lost contact with. In that dream, I was alone, and it was raining and dark, and the thunder struck all around me as I broke down in tears in front of the matching gravestones. When I finally did wake, the house felt different. It was no longer peaceful. It was isolated, lonely, too quiet. Not even the birds were singing anymore. One night, I spent what felt like years switching between dreams, afraid to pick up the phone for fear the next nightmare would be worse than the previous. The final dream, before I woke, was of my old school. A building with Gothic architecture and a grand spiral staircase that I've always admired. Though even in childhood, I had always found them sinister, as they seemed to lead all the way down into the abyss. In that dream, I wandered the abandoned school grounds, unable to find my way out, unable to jump to a new dream or to wake up. There was no one there, and I felt like a ghost haunting the building. I felt lost in the halls, and the sky outside never changed, but stayed the same shade of grayish-orange through what felt like hours upon hours, until the phone finally rang, and I woke up, relieved, in my bed. Since that night, I'd been hesitant to let myself sleep again. I would set timers to only sleep for 20 minutes at a time, desperately trying not to let myself sleep long enough to start dreaming. The madness went on for almost a week before I was no longer able to keep myself awake, and slept through the timer. I woke up after hearing the phone ring and answering it, though I had had no real dreams that night, which was one of the biggest reliefs I've had in my life. It's been 2 weeks since that night. I've slept peacefully, for the most part, ever since. My life has returned to normal, although I had felt it necessary to reach out to people again, to feel less isolated. Between trying old phone numbers that no longer worked and digging around on social media, it was a lot more difficult to find people than I had thought it would be. But I finally managed to track down just one friend. One, I thought, was better than none. I smiled to myself, a little bit painfully. He'd promised he'd call later today, presumably after work, so that we could talk and he could help me get in touch with more people. I almost started crying when I heard my old friend's voice for the first time in over 3 years. He couldn't understand why I was so emotional about it, but merely told me that he was glad to hear from me too, saying that it had been too long. It certainly had. I'm sitting at the dining table now, holding a hot cup of coffee and waiting for the call. I feel a little nervous at the idea that I might not really know what to talk about, that he might leave before I want him to because I'm unable to keep a conversation going. I pick up my cup with slightly shaking hands, and then hear it. For a second, I'm mortified, and then remember that I do, after all, still have a landline. I head over to the wall, pick up the phone, try to speak, can't. I didn't give him the number for this landline. I never bothered changing the previous owner's names in the phone book. There is no way he could possibly know it. I look down at my hand and drop what I'm holding. Staring at me is the bright, colorful plastic toy that I had not seen haunting my dreams in 2 weeks, because I had not woken up again, and I don't think that I will ever be able to. Thank you for listening and watching.